Hello, I'm Alicia Abella, Vice President of Operational Automation and Program Management in the Network Cloud and Infrastructure Organization. So I have a family story that I like to often remember and also tell to young people when I speak to them. And it is one that happened when I was about 12 years old. Or 13, I guess. I was in the 8th grade, and I was on my school's bowling team. Yes, the bowling team. I was born and raised in New York City, Queens to be exact, and bowling was something that you did. So in my school, we had a bowling team, and I was on the team that was tied for first place. And we were getting ready to enter into the final game that would decide who would be in first place and who would be in second place. And you have to understand that this was very important to me as someone who's very competitive and likes to win. So that morning, the games were going to begin at 10 a.m. Now my family and I, we always were used to going to church every Sunday morning. 10 a.m. was usually the time of the Mass. That day, my father gave us permission not to go to Mass that day so that I could get to the bowling alley early enough to get my favorite bowling ball. Because we did not own a bowling ball, because that was an expense we couldn't afford. So we went to the bowling alley early enough to get my favorite ball. Except the ball was not there. The only thing that was there, though, was the girl on the other team that we were tied with. She had her own bowling ball. So I'm going all over the alley looking for my bowling ball, couldn't find it. The game is about to start. My father was there, of course, in the audience to see the game. My mother, being so nervous, could not come to the game. She stayed home. My father, out of nowhere, comes up to me as we're starting the very first frame of the bowling game with the bowling ball. And I said to my father, "How did you find it?" And he says, "Come with me." I went and followed him. He found my bowling ball inside the other girl's bowling bag. She knew that that was the ball I always used, so she hid it in her bowling bag. You can imagine her reaction when she saw that I had my favorite bowling ball. Needless to say, we won that game and came out in first place. So one of my fondest memories growing up was going to Miami Beach. At the time, Miami Beach was nothing like what it is today, but it certainly was a place that I would go to with my parents. I'm an only child. My parents would work all year long to have this one vacation that we would spend in Miami Beach. And why Miami? Because that was like little Havana. And my parents immigrated to this country in the 60s from Cuba. So this was a place that we felt very comfortable with, and we enjoyed the music, the atmosphere, the food. I always enjoyed once a year going to Miami Beach and going to this one particular ice cream parlor that would sell ice cream guava flavored. So guava flavored ice cream was my favorite ice cream, and I could not find that in the Northeast. So that was one of my fondest memories. I also learned how to swim there, had the wonderful guava pastelitos, and also got to have the Cuban sandwiches. As far as I can remember, and as long as I can remember, my parents have always instilled in me the importance of an education. And I'm an only child. My parents worked hard to save money to ensure that they had money to pay for my college education. And when I got the opportunity to go to college, I remember applying to several universities to get my bachelor's degree. And I got the letter of the one university that was my number one choice, and that was New York University. Now, that being said, I remember the first thing I did was to pick up the phone and call my father at work. And I said, "Papi, I got into NYU." And I said, "But it's more expensive than all the other schools that I had gotten into, because some of them had given me a full fellowship, full scholarship to go there, but this one had not, so it was going to cost some amount of money." And he asked me, he says, "Which one is better for you in the long run? Which one will give you the better education?" I said, in my opinion at the time, I said, "This one will." He goes, "Then you're going there, we'll figure it out." And they did. And I did do some work-study programs. I did internships in the summer to save up money for my own personal expenses. And we did manage to get, between the fellowships and the scholarships that I got and the money they had set aside for me, gotten those 4 years of college. Now that in itself, a lot of students have to go through. The other thing that was a challenge for me going to get my education was really when I went to get my doctorate degree, my PhD. And I'll tell you the story about why I wanted to get that PhD. It was because of a summer internship job at AT&T Bell Labs. As a junior at NYU, I had the great fortune of working at Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey. For those of you who may not be familiar with Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey, that was the place of Nobel Prize winners, of the invention of the transistor, and many other important inventions that today we don't even know the impact that they had on our society and civilization today. So for me, it was incredible, especially given I was majoring in science, technology, engineering, and math, specifically computer science. So when I had that summer internship job, I was convinced that I wanted to get a PhD because everybody there had one, and I wanted to go back and work there. So I went back to college that semester, applied to fellowships and scholarships, applied to graduate school, was fortunate enough to get a full fellowship because at that point my parents had saved enough to go to undergrad, not to go another 5, 6, 7 years to graduate school. So I got the full fellowship. I got into Columbia University, so I went from downtown New York to uptown New York, and I was majoring in computer science. I had no idea how difficult this was going to be. They had 4 qualifying exams at the university that you had to pass in order to qualify for the PhD. I had passed the first one, passed the second one, passed the third one. I had one left, and that was a theory exam, so a theoretical exam in computer science. Not something I was all that excited about, but I knew that this exam was standing in my way to get the job I ultimately wanted to apply to, which was back at AT&T. So I took the exam, and I failed the exam. Now, fortunately, they allowed me to take it as many times as I wanted, or as many times as I had the energy and stamina to take it. They only offered it once a semester, so the next semester I went back in there with full confidence that maybe I just didn't study enough the first time, and I took the exam a second time. The second time I took the exam, I failed the exam again. It's like, all right, it's all right. I said, third time's the charm. So I went in there the third semester with that adage of the third time's the charm, and I took the exam a third time. And a third time I failed the exam. Okay, so now I have no adage to hang my hat onto. So I went back to my apartment and cried. And then the next day I picked myself back up. I said, I cannot let this exam stand in my way of my goal, which was ultimately to get that job at AT&T Bell Labs. So I went back the fourth semester. And I should say at this point that there was only one book I had to study. One book, small little book on the theory. And I had read that now many, many times. I took the exam a fourth time. This time, I passed the exam. So I was able to finally get to the point where now I could do my research work, finish my doctorate degree, and get that job that I had set my sights on. And I did not let this exam get in my way. So perseverance, very important to achieving goals. So the story doesn't end there with passing that qualifying exam. Turns out, 15 years later, I would be sitting in a conference room at AT&T Bell Labs, sitting across the table from the author of the book that I had to study for that exam. He and I were now peers. I've been with AT&T now for 23 years, and I started out as a postdoc, which was a very entry-level job that I could be offered as a fresh doctoral student out of graduate school. I got my dream job, which was the job to come back and work at Bell Labs, and I was fortunate enough to work in the area of speech recognition research. And it was a great experience then, and it really catapulted my belief that it's important to work in small teams. Everybody have very identifiable roles, everybody pulling together. in order to achieve success in the projects that you work with. So that very first project I worked with was called How May I Help You? And it was the first spoken dialogue system ever to be deployed in the network. And its goal was to be able to take customer calls that came into the call centers when people had questions about their bill and answer the questions using natural language understanding. So the customer would be speaking in their natural phrases. The computer had to understand what they were saying and then decide how to best route the customer to the right agent. Now, I was like 20-something years old at the time, and this was just like so exciting that I always wanted to work in that area of applied research, applied applications, systems that I knew I could put out there in the real world and people could use. Now, as I was going through working on many different types of projects like this, very similar, one of the things that I recognized was the importance of being able to communicate and describe the value of that technical work. And I was also fortunate in my career to have had mentors, people that, my supervisors, that gave me the opportunities to get out there in front of senior executives and to talk to them about the work that we were doing. And I think that exposure to the senior leadership helped me greatly in terms of putting me on that career path and of being able to go from a postdoc to a limited term employee to finally a full-time employee at the senior level, then the principal level. In fact, I skipped the third level, went to a fourth level, and then most recently, about a year ago, to the vice president level. So I think having supervisors and mentors that can give you exposure, help develop you, was something that certainly helped me. Being in the field of science and engineering, it's very male-dominated, and so I think having people like that that can help pull you up and lift you up and connect you to other broader networks is quite important. And I took advantage of every single one of those opportunities I was given. I really enjoy volunteering for Hacemos and other ERGs. It's my way of giving back to all those folks in my life and in my career that have helped me along the way. I feel like if I could provide some advice, my own experience, some advice, coaching, thoughts to them that could help them on their career journey, that would be great. I especially like working with some of the more junior folks that come in, but I also like to work with those that maybe have been around a little longer and who just need a little bit of a jump start and a little re-energizing. And so if I could inspire them to do that, that's very gratifying to me, and that's really why I enjoy volunteering for ERGs and Hacemos. I'm Alicia Abella, Vice President of Operational Automation and Program Management for the Network, Cloud, and Infrastructure Organization. I'm a first-generation American and a very proud AT&T employee.